It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
The Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. We're up. We're at least getting caffeinated, Logan, on Wednesday morning, and we are ready to go for a film review of one of the ugliest football games. I feel like I say that every week, but like this was genuinely, especially the first half, one of the ugliest football games that I haven't talked to you about it yet because you've been on holiday. But now that you're back, I'm assuming this is one of the ugliest halves of football you've ever seen in your entire life, because it's one of the ugliest halves of football that any of us have ever seen in our entire lives.
Well, it's weird because, when you watch I only watched the L22, and you're kind of like, what's going on in this game? And then I had to watch a recap, like they do those 15-minute recaps on YouTube, the NFL does, and you're like, holy cow, you got a punt blocked, you got an interception early, you got all this change of possession, you got a fumble on a kickoff, a punt return, then you get a fumble recovery by the defense, and you get, it just was like this crazy kind of what could go wrong will go wrong. And it wasn't like it happened over the course of the first half. It was like the first two series there was interception, and then there was the punt block, or maybe maybe three series. So that was just kind of crazy. And I'm checking the updates on my phone while I'm walking around with my family, and you're like, man, it's 27-7 at half. Like, what's going on in this game? So definitely a lot going on that I feel like was a little bit outside of like the players' control and the coaches' control. Like when you get game flow situations like that, you're going to get crazy scores like that. And it was just, I think I called you right after, or called you the next day, and you were like, everything that could have happened in this game. And I feel like that's a very good description of what was going on.
I mean, in the first half for Washington, and we'll obviously talk mostly about the quarterback stuff coming up in just a moment. In the first half for Washington, you had the interception off of Logan Thomas's helmet. You had guys slipping all over the place, which we'll talk about specifically Sam in a moment. You had the let's give up an explosive play in the run game to Breece Hall. Yeah. And then on special teams, I had this in my notes from 1st and 10 from my show. They had a blocked punt, Pringle muffed a kickoff, which cost them mega field position.
I missed that. That didn't even show up in my recap. The muff kickoff. Yeah, that's crazy.
And so they were inside the 15-yard line or whatever, because Byron muffed the catch and then picked it up and didn't get very far. You had the fumbled punt, which is one of the wackiest plays you'll ever see from Jameson. Yeah. He tries to switch hands, and I definitely think the ball was slick. Like there was something going on. Simeon had an issue. Like multiple guys had issues holding on to the ball. But either way, can't happen. And Jameson would be the first guy to tell you that. So you have that wacky bit off a 30-yard return that looked like it might be the thing that changed the game in your direction, by the way. Christian Holmes does what is my least favorite penalty in all of football, which is it's a punt. You have 3 people to 7 people sometimes standing around it, and the guy who touches it down is the guy who was out of bounds for an illegal touch.
They did
like
that.
Literally if you don't touch the football, the referee blows the whistle. You were the guy that's out of bounds. So Christian Holmes had that penalty. And then the absolute, even sillier than that by a lot, is Tariq Castro-Fields is lined up as a gunner on a 4th and 3. And in order to get a good punch, he tries to anticipate the snap, and he jumps off sides. And he gives the Jets a free first down, which leads to their final score of the half. That was all special teams into the first half. That is just absolutely crazy.
That's bonkers. Yeah. I mean, the illegal touching one's crazy. I mean, that's stuff you review quite a bit. I mean, I remember being in meetings and going over that rule ad nauseum, but sometimes guys don't know that they stepped out of bounds. It's like the really good ones, the really aware, experienced guys like the Matthew Slaters are like, I've stepped out of bounds. Someone else please touch the ball. And then the offside thing is, it's kind of borderline inexcusable. It's, especially in that kind of down and distance when you're playing gunner. I know you're trying to make a play, but better error on the side of caution there, especially given the game situation. So, I mean, just listening through that, it's just like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that the game was even close, honestly. You give up, what is that? That's two changes of possession, terrible field position.
You have two special teams turnovers plus costly penalties plus another field position snafu in the muffed kick.
Right. I mean, that's unbelievable.
You want to know why you're able to have a competitive game? Because the Jets committed 14 penalties for 150 yards. They at 2 different points in 2 separate drives. These are not consecutive plays. At one point, they had a 2nd and 40
I
and
saw
a
that.
3rd and 28.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they won the football game.
Yeah, and the Commanders came back. Like, the whole thing was it's just a crazy football game, and I think this is one of the things you're dealing. And I will say this, like, to the team's credit, like, good job sticking with it. Like, it would have been
Yeah.
so easy given the season, given the situation, just be like, you know what, I'm done. This has been fun. Like, it's 27-7. I've had a good time. I'm just gonna play this one out. I'm
Yeah,
good
we're
with
going to park the
27-7.
bus.
Yeah, and they didn't, and good for them, man. Because like everything in this season, I've been a part of. Like I think back to 2011, everything is there for you. To just be like, you know what, this has been fun. I've had a good time. We can move on. I can play for next week. But great job battling back. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, they don't get the W. And but I do think you see a team that has not quit on Ron, which is they've had every opportunity to do that. So I think that's kind of
Yeah.
remarkable in some ways.
You'd wish that maybe there was less quit early. It's
Well,
not even quit at that point. It's like
it's
there's
just
more investment early. It's like,
don't
why
be
do you have
making
to be
mistakes.
down? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, can
don't
we
be
focus
making
from go? But
catastrophic mistakes. But I guess you got a young guy. You got Burgess on the punt team who misses a block, and I don't know how long he's been doing that because I don't watch. Hate to break it to you, fans, don't watch a ton of punt coverage when I'm doing
yeah.
the film breakdowns. But I feel like that's a relatively new position for him.
But I also feel it's relatively new since he took over for Reeves. I mean, he's
Right.
been doing it since
I
Jeremy
guess,
went out.
yeah.
But it's also like, I think that's how, like, I don't feel like he wasn't focused. I just feel like he missed a block.
Yeah,
In
and
the same way that like AG missed that block last week, right? Like
yeah,
maybe your technique's not solid, but like they clearly teach get a hit and get out.
yeah.
And he didn't get a good hit, and so they gave up a block punt. That sucks.
And then you get Jamison Crowder, like a classic over trying situation. He's just trying
Yeah.
too hard, like go down at the first contact. And they are huge plays in the game. And you can't win football games when you turn the football over like that. Like really, I mean, that's so like high level analysis, but it's true. If you're a team that's struggling offensively, you're kind of finding some type of identity defensively. You can't be giving them all this positive. Like it was crazy watching the all 22, and you come to a play and you're like, they're on the 10-yard line. Like, how did that happen? They're on the 15-yard line. Like, what the heck's going on here? And they're going to, like, I don't care how bad your offense is, you're going to score points at that point. So,
Right, and the Jets had barely scored. I think they had one first quarter touchdown all year, and the
right.
Commanders like gift them multiple ones.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a disaster for sure. Which brings us to the quarterback play, and maybe I think this is going to be an interesting discussion that will surprise people. Maybe in a good way. Maybe people will be like, "No, I think what I think," and that's typically how it goes. But when you go back and you watch the quarterback play, and you look at Sam Howell's day, a day that he goes 6 of 22 for 56 yards. Throws 2 interceptions, neither of which I think are his fault. You'll be able to chime in on that in a moment. And has the worst QBR I've literally ever seen. I've never seen a 1.7 QBR on ESPN's quarterback metric. But that's all based off the stats. When you actually watch, like, what went wrong for him? How did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to like make an excuse. I'm just like making an observation when you watch the film. On the first 5 plays, someone's either dropping a pass or falling down in a route, and he can't throw the football because the guy that he's trying to throw the football to, and I've seen guys make these throws and they lead to picks and interceptions. So like he's got Logan Thomas on a choice and he slips, and the guy's breaking on the football, and it's like the whole reason that route works is because my big body's in the way of this defender coming through, and you've slipped. So now I got to bring the ball down, got to reset my feet. And I don't think he's out of place in his career, where he can just kind of, I'm going to hit the comeback. He's not there yet. And he looks a little bit flummoxed, but I don't think it's all on him. Now, does he need to make plays on some of these opportunities? Yeah, but some of them are like quick game and guys fall down. Like
Right.
there's a third, what is it? A third down? Yeah, 3rd and 7. And Logan Thomas is running a dig, like he's running a basic, and he falls. And that's where the ball should go. And because it's such a long developing route, it's like I can't reset. I can't get to my new thing. So I scramble and I end up taking a big hit. So I just think like to start the game out, I felt for him a little bit watching it, because I'm like, okay, you get a dink off Logan Thomas's helmet for an interception, and while that would be a tough catch, that's definitely a catch Logan should make, right? And then you go through and you're like, this guy fell down, this guy fell down, this guy slipped, this is a bad read, this guy on this deep comeback falls down, and so
Curtis does a drop on the play before the interception.
Yeah, on the RPO, which would have been an easy first down. Like, it was a really nice read by Sam. Talk about deleveraging your quarterback by EB. It was a great play. Love that play. Drop the ball. Like, and I think that's the thing that's really frustrating about the evaluations. You come out of it and you're like, so much bad stuff happened to him so early in this game. Like, for example, there was a play I was watching where I'm like, this is a good route. This is independent of people falling down. Jahan runs a good route, right? And it's like a comeback route. A great job by Jahan. He's working on Sauce. And it would have been a really contested throw if you throw the comeback. But I'm like, the play before, Jahan had just fallen down. So how confident is he that he can let this go into a tight window with Sauce Gardner draped over this guy's back? And I just think, like, that stuff has a cumulative effect on the game. And especially how it happened. I think it's probably the first 5-6 plays. Someone's falling, dropping a pass, and it just shakes you. And in this type of game versus this type of defense, the windows are going to be extremely tight, and you got to make confident throws with anticipation. And there are throws later where I'm like, you got to make this throw. Like, you got to anticipate this throw, step up in the pocket and throw this football. But I look back at the first, again, 5, 6, 7 plays, and you're like, I understand why you're not, because you don't have a lot of confidence that it's going to be there. And I think that's the thing that makes this game and makes this evaluation as a data point so frustrating. It's because the offense kind of let them down a little bit. And again, that's not to say it's the receiver's fault or whatever. It's just guys, it's kind of like the special teams things. Like, guys just didn't make plays when they had to make them. And I think it negatively affects Sam's outcome.
Yeah, it's that's terrible turf up there at MetLife. Mostly noted as terrible for injuries, but it just sucks. And, like, guys probably aren't confident running, cutting on it. And again, like, they're professionals. They need to run the routes. They need to have the right technique in and out of breaks and be on balance so they don't fall. Like, all that stuff for sure. You need to catch it. If you're Logan Thomas, you need to catch it. If you're Curtis Samuel, but also, like, you see to solidify your point. I'd like to present Exhibit A, if you will. The second interception, the last pass he winds up throwing, is like, he might have been told, like, hey, man, you got to just trust it. You got to throw it. He throws it. It's a great call by EB. He's got Curtis lined up in the backfield. He gets Curtis one-on-one on a choice route on a linebacker. And Sam puts the ball right where it's supposed to be. And Curtis slips and falls, and thus the ball goes to the linebacker. But you have to throw that with the anticipation as he's coming out of the break. You don't know that he's about to slip. You throw with the right anticipation. All of a sudden, the receiver doesn't go where he's supposed to be because he falls, and the ball goes to the other team. Like, it just sucks as a quarterback. There's nothing you can do there. His process is correct. His result is bad. And I feel for him because early in this game, he was so let down that I think you're 100% correct. Like, and you could kind of see it happening even watching it on TV and watching it live on TV. Nevertheless, when I rewatched the condensed game before watching the All-22, is like, you just see it happening, and you're just like, this is a kid that's shot. And you think of all of the stuff that he's gone through this year, all the sacks he's taken, all the interceptions he's thrown, all this stuff, and eventually, like, even the most resilient of people, and Sam Howell has shown an incredible resilience this year. It's something we've commented on and really like about the kid. But even the most resilient of people eventually hit a breaking point, and it just feels like he is at that breaking point, or at the very least, like, he's walking on thin ice going into every game. And the last couple of games, early, he's been the victim of bad circumstance, bad luck, and thus the ice breaks.
Yeah, and I think, I think that's a great point about him kind of, like, low-key being cooked a little bit. It's a tough thing to watch because you see, I went back and watched some of his games from earlier this year, and again, there's some more space, there's more opportunity, but he's making elite throws. He's throwing into tight windows. He's anticipating throws, and it's not like he's anticipating, the way a high-level veteran quarterback anticipates, but like he says, I know this is going to be there based on coverage. I'm going to fire this sucker in there. And to see that, it's like, it's not even the same guy to a certain extent, so there's been a pretty big regression. And, I mentioned this to you, like, I was prepping for San Francisco and got to watch a lot of Brock Purdy stuff. And I think Brock Purdy gets this rap of kind of being a game manager. But when you watch it, you're like, when he's got to make throws, he is dicing the defense. And it's in this kind of vein of like that what elite quarterbacks do. He doesn't have to do it very often because they're so efficient running the football. And maybe that's a conversation that we can have later, about like EB protecting him, whatever identity of this team. But there's a dig. I forget who they're playing, and it's Tampa 2, and he throws the ball. In Tampa 2, that Mike's running right down the middle of the field, and there's an in cut, and he throws it right to the back of the guy's head, and the receiver comes across and just grabs the ball right before the Mike can turn all the way around. And I thought that doesn't even look open to me. Like that doesn't even look NFL open. But great job. And he does that so consistently, and he trusts his playmakers, and guys go up and they're winning 50-50 balls, and they found a way to get McCaffrey on a linebacker, and it's still like tight window, high level anticipation throws. And when Sam's been in there, the past 4 weeks, that's just not a thing. Like the throws aren't there. And again, they've played better defenses. Things are tighter. I think the last time we saw even a shade of that was versus Dallas in the first half, and it's been rough since then. And I think the other thing that shows up and kind of surprises me a little bit when I watch the Purdy film is the way that he works the middle of the field, and Sam has gotten away from that almost completely. So those are two things that I think are very large red flags regarding Sam's play. But in the context of this game, I think he never was able to kind of find his confidence, find his rhythm. And I think back to stuff Kyle used to do, Sean used to do when they were working with quarterbacks is let's get him a couple easy throws early, right? Help his confidence grow. And that's a thing. And so in this game, you get 2 drops and one leads to an interception. And so how confident is that football player going into the rest of that game? And I would say not very.
So that was something that I wanted to ask you about, because the play calling, I think, when I went back and watched it, I'm ready to be mad. And it's like, they dropped him back a ton. And it's like, no, there's quick game here. They threw a couple as they got into like the third and fourth drives of the game. I mean, the third drive of the game where he had the dropsies and people falling down every play basically up until that point. They start off with a screen and they get Curtis a big gain, first down. And you're like, this is sick. Good job, EB. And they start the next drive, I believe, with a screen to Terry. And so they do, screen it a little bit. They get the running game going, obviously, in this game a little bit. Chris Rodriguez was fantastic. I do wish they'd run it more, obviously. That's a topic we've long covered. But, like, they did run it. And it felt like as they got deeper into drives, then they would revert to more drop back. It was like, all right, drive starter, bang. All right, let's keep it going on the ground, bang. Even I think it's the third drive of the game. They ran it twice in a row, and I was like, oh, looky there. I think
it's the fourth drive of the game.
Or was it the fourth drive?
Screen and then 2 runs, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. That drive, whatever number that was. Math has never been my strong suit.
I mean,
point is,
third, fourth. The third was a 3 and out, so I understand why they're
okay. Yeah, maybe
together.
it was drive 4, drive 5. That was the screen to Curtis, and then drive 5 was the screen to Terry.
Right.
By the way, how often do you have like 5-6 drives in the first quarter?
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
Bad.
But anyway, I felt like as they got deeper into drives, there was as they started to like get a little bit going offensively. Obviously, they never really got much going with Sam in there, but they would get deeper into these drives and then they would revert to drop back. And maybe there's a play action in there. But I'm just curious what you made of EB's attempts to get him out of that funk, and from a play calling standpoint, from a rhythm standpoint, from a hey, let's take some off your plate and run the football standpoint. What'd you make of that?
Yes, I think that fourth drive is interesting because I think it's exactly what you're talking about. You get some positive momentum. You get that screen to Curtis, which again is well executed. Love the offensive line getting out there like Wiley. I mean, you see the advantage of having a guy like Wiley out there who's just hyper mobile, like hyper athlete, gets out into space, does a great job. And I think like that's why you brought this guy in, is because he's a good athlete and he does some stuff in the run game later where I was like, man, I think that's extremely high level, So, and again, he gives up the sack.
Unfortunately, I think that fourth drive also ends with him getting smoked around the edge.
He gives up a sack, and usually we're kind of like we're kind of saying like, oh, Wiley's not playing as bad as people think, and I think when you look at the course of the 61 plays of this game, he played pretty well, but that sack's on him, and I think he'll tell you that, right?
And that's the thing is like, can you make key plays at key times? Right. But anyway.
Continue. No, and I think that's a great point on him specifically, and I think the first and 10 is a play that I like. I like the play. Like if you said, Logan, draw this play up, why are you calling it? Do you like it? it's basically a way for them to get to play action stuff. It's a play action concept off a drop back. And so it just allows them to get more eligibles out. They've got chip help on both sides. They've got another element to it. So basically it's a post by this receiver on the right. I forget who it is. It might be Terry. Deep post, a high cross across the middle of the field, kind of attacking that void where you're hoping coverage carries the post. And then, so usually that's what you get in a play action concept, right? And everything else is kind of dead because
I run that play on Madden all the time. The high cross is always open.
And they ran it versus Miami, and that was the one where Leno didn't block the free runner, and he kind of had to put the ball up to Terry. So they added an element. It's not off play action anymore. They've got a third element where they're running like a big swirl route coming into the void that could potentially be vacant. So love it. I mean, it's there. It's a really nice concept. And I remember thinking, like, why doesn't this work? And everything's tight. There's tight window throws across the board. And I think you're asking him in that moment to do probably more than he's ready to do. And again, that's not saying that he's physically incapable of doing it, but basically on that concept, the reason that it's great is you're saying, I'm going to read the post kind of high cross space. If that's dead, I can either check the football down to the flat, or I can work this swirl that's coming back into my vision. But you got to work through it kind of quick. And it's just not, I don't think he's there right now. Like, just watching him, I don't think he's there right now. So then then it ends up being 2nd and 10. And you run a choice, which I think is a great call. Like, run a choice or like a CO, I forget what it was, but like something short, something to kind of incrementally gain back that yardage that you've lost. And I remember thinking to myself, like, you have Byron Pringle running the corner of a choice, right? So it's like a choice is usually like you get an outside release corner, pick this coverage player so that the choice runner can kind of give more space to work. And I'm like, I know, and in my mind, I'm like, he's going to work the choice side, Sam. So why not put Terry at the corner? Like, why not have him draw that matchup and work that corner route? So your high level throw or your 2-level throw is choice to corner, and Terry's running the corner, where you get a guy who's going to, and so like there were times like that where I'm like, this is a good concept, like the call, but kind of to your point, and I think you brought it up quite a bit, is like, can we formation this where our playmakers are going to be in the progression to that side? And there are reasons not to do that, but I'm also like, at this point, let's try to find ways to get that done. And so then you're in a 3rd and long situation. You run an Omaha takeoff, so an out and up. Curtis wins, like he's open. Like, and I'm not a big fan of like straight vertical routes into a defense, but they're in a tight split. They run this out and up. Curtis is wide open, and you give up a sack. So I think it's, when you look at that, you say, I like the play the first time. I like the second play. Sam, I don't think is in a good spot to read that out the way it needs to be read out. And then I think on the choice, he misses the throw, but I think someone trips or slips or something like that, and it ends up being 3rd and 10. So you had this really excellent momentum, explosive run, explosive screen, and then it just immediately dries up and dies. And that's just, that's tough. So
I was wondering what happened on that 2nd down play, because he just throws the ball like out of range for Pringle. And if someone slipped underneath on the choice, then he just kind of got rid of it to Pringle because he's double covered. That makes a lot of sense because you got nothing. I also think that's one of the other things that is worth pointing out is the way, like, he vacated a ton of clean pockets in this game. And like the way when Jacoby comes in, Jacoby extends plays versus the way Sam extends plays.
Yeah.
And I think, in some ways he's a victim of his own success. Earlier in the year, he had so much success running out of the pocket and making plays off schedule.
That's something we talked about, is like, is this going to be a crutch and a bad habit? And I remember watching, I think it was the Patriots game, he's making explosive plays, and you're like, he's leaving too early. And is this something that's going to bite him in the butt down the road? And
consider him bitten.
Yes, right.
So, I don't know how much there is to add there, but like you watch, when we start talking about, which we're going to in a moment, the differences when Brissett comes in and what Jacoby does versus what Sam does. Jacoby's willingness to stay in the pocket, obviously Jacoby's veteran ability to throw with anticipation, but the way that Jacoby moves within the pocket and the way that he has a sense of it, because there are times where like one of the plays that we already talked about was when I think it was the 2nd drive of the game, when he rolls out and he gets absolutely blasted. And it looks very similar to the pick to Logan. Obviously the Logan play is a designed rollout, but like that same, like he's rolling to his left hard and then takes a shot. And this is the one where the ball pops straight up in the air and luckily falls to the turf, but he gets blasted. He's not under pressure. Like, he just runs into pressure.
But
and I think that to like make a point that we've been making all year, when we say that this offensive line is not the worst in the NFL, and we say this offensive line is playing okay, that they are an average offensive line. One, go look at the rushing stats, yards per carry. I'll say it again. They're doing well. Two, and by the way, they're doing well in spite of the fact that neither of us really like the way they scheme up their run game. They just they hit blocks with consistency, consistency, and their backs are doing a good enough job. And then two, I think, more importantly to the pass game stuff, if you create a pocket and your quarterback's in it and he's safe and he runs out of it and runs into pressure, that's not the offensive line's fault. Yeah. And that is what happened 5, 6, 7 times in this game. Easy.
Yeah. And on that play specifically, that's the one where Logan's running the dig. They're basically set up the play so that his eyes should go to Logan. And I think he's doing the right thing. His eyes are going to Logan over the middle field, and Logan trips and he falls down. And so right when Logan falls, and this is what you can tell when a guy's not in a good spot, is right when Logan trips, the ball comes down. It's like, where do I go with the ball? And there's a comeback, there's some other opportunities, but you got to have that composure. And you've seen you saw Jacoby last week. He was expecting to work Logan over the middle of the field. It wasn't there. He had to reset and throw the kind of slot comeback to Curtis Samuel. And I just think there's an element of composure to Jacoby's game, which comes from experience, which comes from not getting hit 1,000 times or whatever it was, 55 sacks, whatever that number is. And so on this play, I think it shows kind of to me where his head's at, right? You get 2 drops, you get that other one where the next play, 1st and 10 on this drive, Jahan falls down. Yep. Okay. Not there for the throw. Logan falls down on the 3rd and 7. And he's not in a spot where he's confident enough to be like, okay, I know what to do. Let me just get there. Yeah. He's I don't want to say, because I think he's seeing ghosts a little bit. And I think that's part of the issue that you were talking about, or you've been talking about for the last 4 weeks, is like when you leverage this guy to the hilt all the time, like it's not going to be, he's not a veteran that can handle this responsibility, and you've leveraged him to the hilt and he's starting to kind of wither a little bit. And how do you kind of get him back on track is going to be the $1 million question going to the rest of the season. Yeah.
And just real quick, a note on that before we ask the question of like what to do next. This is happening to Patrick Mahomes right now too. Yeah. Like Patrick Mahomes, for the first time probably in his entire career as a starter, he's leveraged, which is fine because he's Patrick Mahomes, and they are not the same. Patrick is still doing incredible stuff each and every week. But like you can see when you watch even the TV, stuff. I'm not going back and watching all 22 Chiefs tape just in case anyone is worried about my well-being. But like you see Travis Kelce open underneath, like you see some of the stuff available to him, and he's starting to just like be like, I got to make a play. I gotta get the ball downfield because I can't trust my guys to catch the ball on a consistent basis. And and also like his demeanor, like he is starting to break a little bit in a way that we've never seen Patrick Mahomes break. And I think Mahomes will be just fine. They'll probably win a couple of playoff games. Like their defense is playing outrageous, and that's why they're still competitive. But you see Mahomes dealing with this on a Mahomesian level. I can't imagine what it's like to be Sam Howell right now dealing with this at his level. And because, by the way, also you don't have the relationship that you have with the Travis Kelce with anybody. You don't have a great defense that's playing at a top 5 level that is going to keep you in the game. Like the pressure of that is so immense, and it is certainly withering down Sam Howell, if not straight up have broken him. Which leads to the inevitable question of what do you do now for the Commanders at quarterback? Logan, I am on record. I said this in the post-game show, which I know you listened to, and I've talked about this on the radio as well. I would start Jacoby Brissett against San Francisco. I would then probably, I don't know what the circumstance would be. I'm sure if like Jacoby goes out and plays a perfect game, it would feel pretty dirty to then bench him again. But I would, in all likelihood, start Jacoby against San Francisco, start Sam again against Dallas, with the reason being you can't bench him a third time and go back to him. He could use a extended reset. I think he could use a full game of watching Jacoby prepare and play and see how it plays out. And then at the end of the season, if you play him against Dallas and you have to bench him again, like the season's over. Who cares? All right, Jacoby, go land the plane. Thanks for everything. And then everybody exits holding hands because none of them are coming back. But at the end of the day, like, I just think for his safety, because he is so, he's so not in it right now mentally. And it's not for lack of effort, whatever. I don't even know the phrasing I want to use. Cooked, if you want to use the word that you used earlier, right? He's so cooked right now that you just can't put him out there again. And especially against this defense, but really against any NFL defense, I would not expose him to that. That's where I'm at. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, I would do something similar. And I was just trying to empathize and kind of put myself in EB's spot or Ron's spot and what they want to do. And I do think, there is a motivation by Ron that he wants to leave a legacy here. And I think there's a guy in Sam who's talented enough to do that. It's just about how you make sure that he's showing that at a critical part of the year. And so I think there's going to be a motivation from Ron to get him back out there. But to your point, like, I've started watching the San Fran stuff. And I was watching the Minnesota game because that's the game that they gave up the most yards and, really struggled. And you're looking at extremely tight window throws, high level anticipation by Kirk Cousins before he hurts himself in that game. And you're just like, this is the antithesis of what Sam is right now. And so if we put him out there and we can't effectively move the football, offensively running or with screens or whatever, because this defense they're ripping to the ball, man. They're really well coached. They're very confident. And, Fred Warner's a beast, all that kind of stuff. I don't know, based on these last 4 weeks of production, how he even functions, how the offense even functions with him at the helm. So I think you owe it to the rest of the guys on the roster to basically be like, hey, man, we're going with Jacoby. And just to be clear, it's not like Jacoby's like the second coming in terms of quarterback play. Like, he made
I don't know, man. First 5 drives of the season, all touchdowns. What more do you want?
Yeah, I mean, tight window throw to Logan Thomas on the Skinner on the post route. Really excellent. And that's a throw that I don't think Sam makes right now. And I think that's the difference. He's the confidence, the delivery. Like, Sam's physically capable of doing that. Obviously, we've seen him do that earlier in the year, but he's just not doing it right now because I think there's, he's cooked a little bit. And so that's a good throw by Jacoby. Then he throws a stick route to Terry, and Terry makes a great play. Then they get a DPI. And so it wasn't like he was out there just dealing and dicing people up. And he had his own struggles against this defense. I'm talking about Jacoby. And I think Jacoby he gives you the best chance to win against San Francisco. I think he gives you the best chance to look good offensively, but don't get it twisted. It's not like it's going to come out and this offense is going to look great because they create a ton of pressure. They've got an excellent defensive line. They've got the secondary, I think, is underrated in terms of how effectively they operate. So I don't expect like a miracle is what I'm saying. I think you'll see more productive.
So for the draft position people, which is not what Ron's thinking about at all, you're not risking winning, like more risking winning, if you will, than if Sam is out there. But it's still Jacoby Brissett and the Washington Commanders versus the San Francisco 49ers. Like, come on.
And, they got embarrassed on, what was that, Christmas? They got embarrassed?
Yeah.
They're going to come out and be ready to rock and roll. There's no doubt in my mind. They're going to use that as a springboard because that's what good teams do. So I look at that and I say, in terms of Sam, I probably feel comfortable starting Jacoby the last 2 games of the year. Like, I really would, because it's like he has just regressed so badly at this point. It doesn't do anybody any favors. And unless, like, in practice or during the week, you kind of feel like he's found his rhythm again. He's more confident. Maybe you play him against Dallas. Maybe you feel like, hey, we can get him in for the second half of San Francisco when we're down by 15 points, whatever that looks like. But I don't think right now, after watching this game and after watching the last couple of games, that he's in a very good spot to play football.
I want to address something real quick that you'll have great insight on because you were here for it. I had a caller yesterday that was basically like, you got to find out what he is. You got to keep playing him. You got to see if he can get through this. And my retort to that is that's actually not, like, he is not preordained to be something as an NFL quarterback. It is not inevitable that he will be good or bad. The way that you treat him will help shape whether he is good or bad in the future. And benching him might be beneficial because if he's cooking and he's not cooked, then you can save him from becoming cooked. And that could actually be the thing that works out for his future the best, as opposed to, letting him play through it. You're actually just torturing him more. And the thing that I'm going to reference the guy that I'm going to reference that you were here for is Kirk. Kirk
Yeah.
got benched multiple times in 2013 and 2014 before ultimately becoming the starter in 2015. Like, what do you remember from those ins and outs? And obviously, there was a lot going on with the quarterback position then, with Robert being the focal point. Colt played some good ball in that time as well, and kind of left here sour that he was the only guy that didn't get benched because of injury, or that didn't get benched because of performance. He only got sat because of injury, and he never really got a fair shot again. But for Kirk specifically, the guy who it worked out for in the NFL, what do you think he took out of those? What do you remember from those times that he's on the sideline and for getting benched in 2013, 2014 that ultimately plays out in his favor long term?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kirk is a guy that is kind of wired the right way and built the right way and does things the right way and is motivated to be great. But there were times like where you're on the sideline, you hear the coaches talking to him, you're in the huddle, and you get a sense that he's not seeing it very well. He's not comfortable with what he's looking at, and so you bench him. And I think in those opportunities, you kind of the coaches identified that he was having an issue, that the offense was having an issue, and that a change needed to be made. And I do think if they had left him in those situations, like knowing Kirk at that time in his life, that would have cascaded into something terrible. Like, we're talking, he had multiple interception games. We're talking 4, 5, 6 interceptions because that's just how his process was. He was kind of so high strung in those moments. And I think the coaches save him. They save him from making a drastic mistake, drastic kind of failures. And it allows him to grow in a somewhat healthy way. And I think when you look at his process and how it grew, like those things shape that. And so that's one thing about Sam this year that I think a lot of people were, in retrospect, were rightfully worried about, is like maybe it's too much too soon giving him the starting role. Like, let Jacoby be the guy, let him run the ship for a little bit. It'll get to a point where Jacoby is going to have an issue. And then Sam comes in and plays out the rest of the year. And it kind of lets you kind of establish who you want to be offensively. It lets you kind of see the issues you're having in terms of offensive line or whatever, right? And you get a guy who can emotionally and mentally handle that. And I think that there's value to it. And so I think the fact that they did it the other way, which there's nothing wrong with that decision, but this is a possible issue with that, is that you get in a situation where a young player is not playing confident football. And I think Kirk is a great example of a guy who kind of had little downs, like little down slopes. They stop the slide, they preserve his confidence, they get him back in there. And so it's kind of like the stock market. It might look like a bad data point, but ultimately that thing trended positively for a very long time, like over the course of his career. And now he was playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. So I think that's something that, again, I think back to is like, it's just how you handle the individual. And Kirk, as you know, Kirk is kind of like that. And I think that worked really well for him. Would it have worked well for Sam? Is it going to work well for Sam? I have no idea.
Yeah, I trust Sam's resilience in getting benched to not bother him long term. I don't trust him to find it without this hard reset. Like, that's kind of my thing, is like, I think the best thing for Sam, he's not going to be like, oh, my career's over, I suck because I got benched. He's going to be like, okay, I finally get to breathe. Like that. I think that's important in knowing that. Yeah. I don't know. I think the conversation that you just, hypothesized with starting Jacoby earlier is a really interesting one. I don't want to do revisionist history, though, and pretend like, when we talk about Sam being better than Jacoby for much of training camp, like that was true. I think for most of camp, like
I think that's the thing though about him, and I think what you're seeing now, and again, it's hindsight's 2020. So I'm not. Sure. This is not a criticism of the staff, because I think this is how I felt. Is definitely the ceiling of Sam Howell was much higher. His physical ability was good, and you saw him do enough of kind of like the minutia to feel good about it. But when you watch Jacoby against Baltimore, against the defense in practice, and he's able to identify coverages and get the ball out and identify protections, and that's stuff that is now, I think, becoming a little bit of an issue week in and week out. The ability to anticipate throws at a high level, like all that kind of like varsity.
But they were close enough that it like wasn't crazy.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but the stuff that Jacoby was doing better is something you'd expect a veteran to be doing better with, right? And those are things that Sam is still having a hard time with, because it's hard to develop those skill sets in season. The anticipation, the tight window throws, the protections, understanding when you're hot, all those things Jacoby was significantly better at. But in terms of high level arm talent, dynamic release, pushing the ball down the field, tight window, like, where I'm a little off platform throwing that football, it's all Sam in that regard. So physically you saw, but I do think that it's that other kind of nuts and bolts of playing the quarterback position where we haven't seen the improvement that I think we all were hoping. He has improved.
Right.
Let me back. He has improved, but he's not at Jacoby's level with that stuff just yet.
For sure. And we thought, I know it's hard to do in season, but you figure with some experience, like he would learn and all that kind of stuff. And
I think we also thought that they weren't going to, that the offensive play calling and the offensive philosophy was going to be a little bit more conservative. And I think early in the season, I was kind of surprised at how effective this really aggressive approach was. But I think it kind of also led to like kind of this false reality a little bit, basically saying like, oh, he's done this, he can do it, as opposed to saying maybe we should have started with something a little bit different that helps kind of mitigate some of the risk that this offense is exposed to. And again, that's one of those things that's really hard to do because the defense didn't live up to billing and you're in these shootout games every single week. So very complicated, obviously hindsight's 2020, but I do think that having that kind of steady pace of Jacoby in there is going to be a significant bump. So,
yeah, for sure. I'm currently searching my notes for too much. And I'm like, when did I start talking about them running the ball too much? Because it was early in the season when things were working. And that's always kind of been my thing, is like the bigger mistake wasn't starting Sam over Jacoby. It was how they've played with Sam this year from a play calling and approach standpoint. They have leveraged him too much. And in some ways, like the worst thing that happened was it worked early. And so they were like, oh, yeah, this is good. We're going to be able to play through this. We're going to win some football games and Sam's going to get better. And it's like, no. You're getting lucky. You're getting lucky. And you caught certain teams at the right time and all of that stuff. So that is what it is. So we both agree we would start Brissett at the very least versus San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a question at this point.
Okay. Well, we're recording this at 8:15 in the morning on Wednesday, December 27th. Sometime around 4 p.m. today, Ron Rivera will announce that. So if that press conference hasn't happened by 4 o'clock, we will carry it live on the Hoffman Show. And if it has, then Chris Russell will carry it live. So there you go. All right, wrapping up Take Command. We will be live back at Tap Sports Bar this weekend, MGM National Harbor. Come hang out with us for the Take Command pregame show. Logan will be back. Very subdued Linnell this weekend, by the way.
Really?
You get a pregame kind of groggy Linnell. Much more in the lines than an in-game or a post-game Linnell. When he's fired up, his anxiety is built. Yeah. We had a good time.
I used to do that in-game show with him where we were kind of reviewing
things as they happen.
Yes, and he would get so up and so down, but it was fun. It's perfect for that kind of thing. But it's funny that he can like turn it on, turn it off. I think so.
Yeah. So we had a good time, but Logan is back this weekend. So come celebrate or get your New Year's Eve celebration started with us at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor on Sunday. 10 a.m. is when the show starts. Doors open if you want to come hang out in person at 11. All right, Logan, quickly to wrap up the podcast here. The defense, they didn't have a chance in the first half because they did not get to line up on the right side of the 50 until the fourth drive of the game.
That's crazy.
Truly nuts. You had the turnovers, you had the block punt, you had a pretty poor punt by Tressway. I didn't even put that in the special teams notes earlier. And then eventually they were on the right side of the 50. By that point, they had given up some points because, of course, they had. Even with holds, you're giving up field goals there. They do give up the explosive to Breece Hall. Then they pitch a shutout to the very end in the second half. So you see a mixed bag. I felt like they were playing faster, more physical. Like I actually liked a lot of what I saw on defense outside of Benjamin St-Juste continually getting picked on. But we can talk about that in a second. Overall, big high-level thoughts on the defense. How did you come down in this game?
I mean, they're playing better than they were, which is good. Like, it's good to see guys like Percy Butler flying to the football. I love watching Quan Martin. He's not always in the right spot. He's not always doing the right thing, but he is a physical, aggressive, passionate football player that is, I love watching him play. Like there's a play, I forget, they're running a duo out of a bunch and the receiver's coming to crack him because he's the nickel player. And he literally bench presses this dude over it was you get like that gives me chills thinking about it. I think you got some better rushes from James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill this week. You can tell they worked through it. They've been working really hard on that. So great job by them. I thought John and Duran flashed a little bit. I think I'd still like to see Duran catch some rushes from the edge, especially after how effective it was in the one opportunity he had versus LA.
Right.
Cody Barton, like, he's just a guy that I think you see why they brought him here, like the elevation of the position and how he elevates people around him. So like that's been awesome. The interception, he had a really nice pass breakup in the red zone. Like he's a good football player. I think he's not quite as effective in the run, but I think he's doing what he's supposed to do, and he's elevating the guys around him. So like that's fantastic. Kendall Fuller, I think.
Yeah, I think just real quick on Cody, like I think you either need to get a stud middle linebacker and you can keep Cam Curl and kind of that secondary group together, or you need a stud communicator at safety and you can live with Barton and Davis.
Well, I think that's the thing is like, that's a great point. Like when you watch Cody, like his level of communication has elevated everybody in that front. And I think you just need that same level of communication in the back end. And I think Cam Curl's a really good football player, but he's not quite that mouthpiece that I think this defense needs at the moment. And I think that's where you see some of the issues. Not because of him, but because stylistically they don't have anybody that's this really great communicator in the back end that's getting people on the same page. So, so Cody gets a lot of credit. Khalid gets a lot of credit. Like he just plays, much as I was talking about Quan, he just plays hard, man. And it's not always in the right spot. It's not always perfect, but he's flying to the football. He plays with great energy, plays with great emotion. Love that. Mayo, I thought, did some really good stuff, like in his role, like when they're in these heavy run formations, like that's what Mayo's good at. Get him out there, does a great job. So I think obviously not a perfect game. I think they were pretty close in terms of.
But they were also leveraged to the hilt, man. They PFF had him at 90 snaps.
Dude, 91 is what I had, yeah. And so 100%. And like you're just
85 official snaps when you take out the penalties and stuff. 85 official plays in the game.
And I think one of the things you look at there is you're like, they are doing a good job, but then there's these situations on 3rd and 7 where they throw a hitch to Garrett Wilson and he makes a guy miss and gets a first down. And like you've done everything. It's 3rd and 7. Like you've won the first 2 downs of this.
Are you talking about the one where Quan nearly picks it and then, or is that because it happened multiple times?
It happened twice or 3 times, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that was one of them.
Quan's so close, and you're like, yeah. And even if he tries to go for the tackle instead of the pick.
And it surprises him, like the ball's in there, and it's like, oh, it's like you're right here, and those things happen. But I think the fact that there was multiple missed tackles that led to extensions of drives, like you mentioned that 90 or 85 plays, whatever we settled on there. I think that's something that I'd still like to get fixed. But I think the catastrophic mistakes have come way down. We can talk about that run real quick. That's like a duo, and that's kind of a new run, I'd say, in the last 2 years. So basically you get the tight end off the ball to the right, and instead of running duo to the tight end side, which is to the right, you bring him across the formation. He kicks out. The fullback, who's also a tight end, leads up. And so basically the reason that run is so effective is you set the strength of your defensive line to the tight end. So you put your 3 technique to the tight end. And by structuring it that way, you have a shade to the weak side. So someone who's lined up on the outside shoulder of the center. So there's a natural bubble there between the tackle, who in this case is Deron Payne, and the defensive end, who's Casey Toohill. So you've created space. So there's nobody over the tackle. And that's by design because you're not expecting them to run over there. When you do this quick change of strength motion, you can't adjust the shade to a 3 technique. It makes a really easy down block for the tackle, a really good line to the linebacker, and then Barton is getting kicked out in a lead situation where he's scraping over the top, kind of avoiding the tackle, makes an easier block, and then you got to get Benjamin St. Juste to fit that run. So I think like that's a good play design. They've seen that play before. They've fit it better. But when you run that behind Mekhi Becton, who's maybe one of the best run blocking tackles in the NFL, like you're going to get some movement. There's going to be some space. And Breece Hall, when you give him space, is going to have a pretty successful day. So there's that. But outside of that and the DPIs, I mean, that was another thing that drove me nuts watching by St. Juste. He had 2 of them. Like those extend drives in significant ways. And there's a couple situations where, to his credit, and again, I know a lot of people want to give him credit, like he'll make a nice PBU, he'll make a nice tackle, and it's all him. Like you're in 2nd and you're in 3rd and 10 because of him, and then they're in 1st and goal because of a DPI that you gave up. So I think there has been an improvement in his play, but there's still these blemishes that you kind of look through. Like, he had a great PBU in the red zone that keeps a touchdown off the board. You're like, great job, Benjamin St-Juste. But then you have those 2 other ones that extend drives,
Right.
and one's a chunk explosive play, quite frankly. So
yeah, to me, I was incredibly frustrated. One, because they keep, like, it's the same thing we talked about all year. If Benjamin St-Juste is a good football player, okay, great, but he's not a number 1 corner. Quit putting him on number 1 receivers. And, Garrett Wilson is torturing him, and you're just like, okay, this is preventable. Why are we doing this? So that's thing 1. Thing 2, I can't imagine being Ron Rivera as the defensive coordinator, Ron Rivera, and having my number 1 overall pick that I was so excited about on the bench and watching teams every single week pick on a guy who is out there trying his damnedest, and he's making some plays, but there's an inevitability to it because he's only so good. And you can't get caught up in the good that Benjamin has and be like, oh, well, the bad will just disappear. No, they're both going to happen. And the bad is inevitable. So, like, you have Emmanuel Forbes. What are you doing? I don't know what Emmanuel Forbes did or is doing to Ron Rivera in practice or during the week or whatever, but it is inexcusable at this point in a season to me, based off what we know. And I will caveat it by saying there could be something happening in the building. For all I know, like, Emmanuel runs around in practice with his pants on his head or something. I don't know. Whatever the hell he could be doing during the week. But unless there's something crazy, in which case he shouldn't be dressing and, like, you should suspend him. Right? But unless there's something crazy happening, there's no reason in a lost season in these games to not have Forbes out there. And I think Emmanuel played pretty well once he got in. I know that Ron was like, oh, well, there's still some things we have to clean up. No kidding. He's a rookie. But, like, give him the chance to do it. You can't do what you've done to Sam on one end and then take your 1st-round pick from this year on the other and take a completely opposite, different approach. Like, I think that's one of the things that really frustrates me about this regime is, like, who gets the discipline, who gets there's no consistency in how they treat players. And it seems like some of the defensive guys and their 1st-round picks especially have really gotten the raw end of that deal over the years. Jamin, I feel like, got that a couple years ago. Emmanuel's getting it now. And there's just no consistency. And I would imagine that's not great within the locker room. But I think more importantly, like, larger picture, I don't think it's good for the player's development. And I also think it's not fair to Benjamin. Like, quit making him be in positions that are bad. And just all in all, when there's a solution that's obviously present, or that obviously present in Emmanuel, like, I don't get it. I can't possibly get it.
And I think to that point, and just to kind of flesh that out, I think back to training camp, and they had it right. I think they said Benjamin St-Juste is going to be the nickel. Forbes is going to play outside. Fuller's going to play outside. And I think we kind of like, that's weird. Why not Fuller at the nickel and St-Juste playing outside? But I think that's seems to be his home, seems to be where he's more comfortable, and he does a good job there. So think about, you're kind of taking him out of this role where he's comfortable, he's playing well, and he's playing outside now all the time. And I don't really understand it, because Quan was a guy that I thought was struggling a little bit more than Forbes, and he's played well. And it'd be interesting to talk to somebody about why there's been this reluctance to play him. Obviously, the injury is maybe still a thing, but ultimately, I think you want to see him out there. And it kind of reminds me of, like, when you have like a running back who's very, very talented, but is not good at picking up the blitz, and, like, they can't play. Like, they literally, you cannot put them on the field because they don't know what they're doing when they're picking up blitzes. And so people can say all they want, oh, they're struggling, whatever. Like, I don't care. He can't play because anytime there's a pass, if he screws it up, unless you're Adrian Peterson, let's be very clear, right? Like you're the best running back of all time. So I don't know enough about cornerback play and, like, kind of how that goes to say what is that thing, but it feels like there's something like that happening, because each week it's like there's some stuff we got to clean up. Like, what is that thing that would be so detrimental that he can't play? Is it run fits? Because the corners have to tackle a lot here. He struggled with that early in the season. So
sure, but, like, he was good in that area on Sunday, and Benjamin St-Juste was the guy who needed to clean up on the touchdown.
Yeah. So I just would be curious, again, to kind of get more insight on that perspective, because I think I will say this about Ron: he does a really good job of not calling guys out in the media unless he has to. Unlike, you mentioned Jack Del Rio and Jamin Davis, like, he had no problem doing that. Ron is not going to do that. So I want to know what that thing is. What is the thing that needs to get cleaned up, and how significant is it? Because if it's something that's very significant to their new defensive identity, then yeah. But what is it? Like, why don't you just say, like, he's having a hard time with
coach it up for him?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm not saying,
yeah.
I'm sure they are coaching
Yeah.
it up. I'm not being critical of that, but I'm just saying, like, I think
Yeah.
he's doing.
We're
like
on the same page.
Yeah, he's doing a thing where he's like holding something close to the vest, probably trying to protect the player. But like, could it be? My question, I guess, is on the scale of what is the level of significance? Like, you're a running back who can't pick up a blitz. That's pretty significant. Are you a cornerback who's not the best at tackling in the run game? That seems less significant to me. But what is that thing? And I'm just curious to know what it is.
I would love to know.
Yeah.
Would love to know, because the results say that Forbes has been good for, in very limited action since the New England game. Like,
right.
What are we doing? And also
he's had an injury, to be fair.
For sure.
Stuff there.
But like, I guess I just look at it as like, Ron's like, I have to leave my legacy. I have to do this with Sam. I have to do. It's like, bro, this was the guy that you were on draft morning in your car that you put out in, after you took him. Oh, Forbes is our guy. Like, okay, then play him. Like,
right.
You got him. You got your guy. Let's see him. Let's see your first round pick. And like you said with Quan, like, what is it that Quan's doing that they're all in on Quan and letting him play that Emmanuel's not? I don't get it. But who knows? We'll see what happens. BSJ injured in this game, obviously, which is why Emmanuel came in. He and many others, long list of injuries that Ron is going to give updates on Wednesday. So we'll see how those guys are shaping up for San Francisco. We are going to preview San Francisco and what they do coming up on our next podcast. Also working on a very fun guest that actually, I'll even say the guest. We don't know for sure that we're going to get him this week, but for sure in the near future, Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, is going to join us. He's obviously got a great view on all the college prospects, but also he's been tweeting out about some of the front office folks who are maybe not general managers, but director of pro personnel, director of college scouting type of GM candidates that Jim has gotten to know real well over the years down in Mobile. So we will talk to Jim Nagy coming up soon, amongst other guests here on the Take Command podcast. I'll see you all on the radio until the next episode of this here show. Also, make sure you're subscribed if you haven't. We're going to have so much coverage of all the offseason stuff, all the presumed changes coming, etc. So now is good a time to get on board as ever as we survive the next couple of weeks together. That's Logan. I'm Craig. We'll see you next time on the Take Command podcast.